Sometimes I am God. If I say a man dies, he dies. Pablo Escobar. The name alone evokes a sense of fear and dread, as he remains one of the most violent figures on the globe. In the 1980s, one man's greed and ambition turned Colombia into chaos. Pablo Escobar was the best at what he did. But behind the glorified headlines of his drug empire and cartel wars are the stories of those who paid the ultimate price. Who were these people? Who were the victims of Pablo Escobar? And more importantly, was he really that cool, powerful drug lord that he is often portrayed as? Spoiler alert, he's not. In this video, I will expose him for the monster that he was and tell the stories of his estimated 4,000 victims. But be warned, because your favorite drug lord has more in common with Epstein and R. Kelly than you might think. And this video will change your opinion of Pablo Escobar forever. The horrors of Avianca Flight 203. One of the most horrific acts attributed to the Medellín Cartel was the bombing of Avianca Flight 203 on November 27, 1989. Orchestrated by Pablo Escobar, this attack was part of his violent campaign to prevent the extradition of drug traffickers to the United States. A man named Alberto was unwittingly tricked into carrying the bomb, believing he was on a surveillance mission. Shortly after takeoff from Bogota en route to Cali, the bomb detonated, killing all 107 people on board, including passengers, crew, and 3 individuals on the ground. Among the victims were innocent men, women, and children. Dandini Muñoz Mosquera, known as La Kika, was accused of organizing the attack. He was sentenced to 10 life terms due to the presence of 2 American citizens and a German among the victims. Despite his repeated claims of innocence, the bombing remains a haunting symbol of the cartel's reign of terror. The Avianca bombing was just one of many lives destroyed by Escobar. In Medellín, even children weren't safe.
In the streets of Medellín, young people living in extreme poverty became the backbone of the Medellín Cartel's operations. With few opportunities available, these vulnerable youngsters were easy targets for drug traffickers. Escobar and his associates took advantage of their desperation, offering money, status, and protection in exchange for their loyalty. For many, joining the cartel seemed like their only chance at a better life. The lack of education and government support pushed some of these recruits, even minors, into roles as hitmen, drug mules, and enforcers. Their eagerness to take risks and the promise of wealth fueled the cartel's power, exploiting social inequality to expand its influence. Escobar crafted an image as a benefactor to the poor, funding community projects like houses and soccer fields to gain their support while secretly building an army of young recruits. One of these recruits, John Jairo Arias, known as Pinina, emerged as a feared hitman during the 1980s and early 1990s. Pinina was trusted by Escobar and involved in violent operations, including assassinations of politicians and rival traffickers. His notoriety wasn't just due to his violence, but also his flashy lifestyle, filled with displays of wealth and power. It's estimated that he was involved in dozens of murders for the Medellín Cartel. His reign came to an end on June 14, 1990, when a betrayal by his housemaid led to a national police operation that resulted in his death. Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, a tragic turning point. Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, Colombia's Minister of Justice, became one of the Medellín Cartel's early victims. After making strong accusations against Escobar, Lara and his family began receiving death threats from the cartel. To protect him, the government offered him a diplomatic post as ambassador to Czechoslovakia, which he accepted, set to begin on May 12, 1984. The fall of Tranquilandia. Tranquilandia was one of the largest cocaine production complexes controlled by the Medellín Cartel, hidden deep in the Amazon rainforest of Colombia. This massive drug laboratory was discovered and destroyed in 1984 during an anti-narcotics operation by the police, with support from the DEA. Tranquilandia operated like a drug empire, featuring dozens of laboratories and several airstrips used to send refined cocaine to the United States. During the operation, authorities seized over 10 tons of cocaine valued at hundreds of millions of dollars, along with a large quantity of chemical precursors. The destruction of Tranquilandia marked a significant victory for law enforcement and dealt a severe blow to the Medellín Cartel. However, it also had serious political repercussions. Escobar and his allies accused Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla of orchestrating the operation, leading to Lara's assassination shortly afterward. Tragedy struck on the night of April 30th, 1984. While driving his white Mercedes-Benz along 127th Street in northern Bogotá, Lara was ambushed and shot by hitmen from the Medellín Cartel. After the attack, he was rushed to a hospital but was declared dead shortly after arrival. Lara's assassination marked a dark turning point in Colombia's battle against the cartel, igniting fear and chaos in the nation. The event galvanized the government's efforts to combat the Medellín Cartel, sparking an era of intense conflict and bloodshed. The extraditables. In the 1980s, a group of Colombian drug traffickers emerged, fiercely opposing the extradition of their associates to the United States. Known as the extraditables, this group was primarily made up of members of the Medellín Cartel. They viewed extradition as a death sentence for their freedom and their business. As drug trafficking escalated in Colombia, the government, in collaboration with U.S. authorities, adopted aggressive measures to combat the crisis, including signing an extradition treaty. This agreement allowed the U.S. to request the extradition of Colombian traffickers to face trial on American soil. Faced with this threat, the extraditables launched a brutal campaign of terror, declaring they would prefer a grave in Colombia to a prison cell in the U.S. Led by notorious figures like Pablo Escobar, Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, and the Ochoa brothers, the Medellín Cartel escalated its violence, declaring war on the Colombian state. In 1989, they unleashed a wave of terrorist bombings, assassinations, and attacks against government officials and anyone they deemed an obstacle. Their infamous list of extraditables named judges, politicians, and security officials who supported extradition, turning them into targets of threats, kidnappings, and murders. The increasing violence and international pressure forced the Colombian government to take more drastic action against the cartels. While many extraditables were eventually killed or arrested, their legacy left a deep, bloody mark on Colombia's history. The Palace of Justice siege. One of the most tragic events in Colombian history occurred during the Palace of Justice siege on November 6th and 7th, 1985. The M19 guerrilla group stormed the palace to stage a symbolic trial against then-President Belisario Betancourt, accusing him of failing to honor peace agreements. About 35 guerrillas entered the building, taking magistrates, officials, and employees hostage. Over 300 people were present during the attack, with the guerrillas demanding government accountability. The Colombian army launched a counter-operation to rescue the hostages, leading to chaotic and violent confrontations that lasted over 28 hours. The aftermath was devastating. More than 100 people died, including 11 Supreme Court magistrates, and at least 11 others disappeared. John Jairo Velázquez Vázquez, also known as Popeye, one of Escobar's hitmen, claimed that the Medellín Cartel financed the M19 operation to destroy judicial records related to drug trafficker extradition. However, some guerrilla members denied this connection. The terror of car bombs. Car bombs became one of the most horrifying tactics employed by the Medellín Cartel during the 1980s and early 1990s. These attacks involved detonating vehicles packed with explosives in urban areas to create chaos and instill fear in the populace, pressuring the Colombian government to abandon extradition. The use of car bombs peaked between 1989 and 1993 during the Narco War. Escobar and his cartel directly challenged President Cesar Gaviria, a staunch supporter of extraditing drug lords. These attacks resulted in countless casualties and instilled a permanent climate of fear in Colombia's major cities, deeply affecting daily life. It's estimated that over 1,000 people lost their lives to this brutal tactic, with thousands more injured. The legacy of Guillermo Cano. Guillermo Cano was a courageous Colombian journalist and editor of the newspaper El Espectador, known for his fearless investigative work against drug trafficking. His relentless fight against the cartels significantly impacted public perception, helping to prevent Escobar from entering politics, especially after publishing a front-page photo of the drug lord, when he was arrested for drug possession. As Cano intensified his denunciations against Escobar and his allies, they saw him as a growing threat that needed to be eliminated. His final editorial, titled
Se le hace fiesta a los criminales.
A Celebration for Criminals, condemned President Virgilio Barco's reinstatement of extradition, sealing his fate. On December 17, 1986, Cano was assassinated shortly after 7 o'clock by 2 Medellín Cartel hitmen outside El Espectador's headquarters. His murder struck a heavy blow to Colombian journalism, highlighting the dangers faced by those who dared to expose drug trafficking. Despite his tragic death, Cano left a legacy of courage and commitment to the truth, becoming a symbol of the fight for freedom of expression. His memory is honored in Medellín with a statue recognizing his battle against evil. The fight of Luis Carlos Galán. Luis Carlos Galán, a prominent Colombian politician and presidential candidate, was known for his strong stance against drug trafficking and his calls for state reform. He became a significant critic of the Medellín Cartel, advocating for stricter policies to combat drug trafficking. In his 1989 presidential campaign, Galán promised to dismantle the drug cartels and restore government authority in regions ravaged by the drug trade. Luis Carlos Galán's rising popularity and fierce determination made him a significant threat to the Medellín cartel's interests. In 1989, after secret meetings between Pablo Escobar and Gonzalo Rodríguez Gacha, known as El Mexicano, the cartel plotted Galán's assassination. At that time, Escobar was hiding on a farm in Magdalena Medio, near Puerto Boyacá. Once the decision to eliminate Galán was made, Escobar ordered his hitman, Popeye, to locate Ricardo Prisco, who was then brought to the farm to carry out the mission. Escobar provided Prisco with a fake ID bearing the name of Pacho Herrera, an enemy of the Cali cartel, to purchase a vehicle for the attack on Galán. This tactic aimed to frame the Cali cartel for the assassination, redirecting law enforcement's attention away from the Medellín cartel. Tragically, on August 18, 1989, after a failed initial attempt, the cartel successfully assassinated Luis Carlos Galán Sarmiento. The attack was meticulously orchestrated, allowing the mafia to infiltrate Galán's own security detail. Paradoxically, this event is often seen as the beginning of the end for the Medellín cartel. Carlos Later, the drug trafficking pioneer. Carlos Later was a key figure in the Medellín cartel, playing a crucial role in expanding drug trafficking between Colombia and the United States. He pioneered a sophisticated cocaine transportation network, using Norman's Cay in the Bahamas as his operational hub. This private island became a strategic point for planes loaded with white gold, which were then distributed throughout the U.S., particularly in Florida. Later revolutionized the drug trade by introducing air transportation for large quantities of cocaine, significantly enhancing the efficiency and profitability of shipments. However, in 1987, Colombian authorities captured him in a joint police and military operation, delivering a severe blow to the cartel. What surprised many was how easily he was caught, which was unusual for someone of his stature. Several theories surround his arrest. Some believe he was betrayed by his own staff, frustrated with his mistreatment. Others suggest annoyed neighbors alerted the authorities due to the noise from his extravagant parties. There are even whispers that his own cartel associates played a role in his capture. Some speculate that Pablo Escobar facilitated his arrest, viewing Later as a growing threat after a particular incident at one of Later's parties, but this remains unconfirmed. Barry Seal, the double agent. Barry Seal was an American pilot who became notorious as both a drug smuggler and an undercover agent for the U.S. government during the 1970s and 1980s. With his extensive flying experience, Seal emerged as one of the primary pilots transporting cocaine from Colombia to the United States, using clandestine airstrips in Colombia to land large shipments in Florida. His ability to evade authorities made him invaluable to drug traffickers. In the early 1980s, Seal was arrested in the U.S. for drug trafficking. To reduce his sentence, he decided to collaborate with the DEA, becoming an informant. Under DEA supervision, he continued operating as part of an undercover plan to gather information on drug cartels.
In 1984, SEAL took part in an undercover operation that captured photographs of high-ranking Medellín Cartel members, including Pablo Escobar, loading cocaine onto his plane in Nicaragua. These images served as critical evidence linking Colombian cartels to Nicaragua's Sandinista regime. However, his cooperation with the U.S. government made him a target for the Medellín Cartel. In 1986, Barry Seal was shot dead in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, by hitmen hired by the cartel in retaliation for his betrayal. Peter McAleese, the mercenaries' mission. Peter McAleese, a former British soldier and Special Forces veteran, gained notoriety for his involvement in a failed attempt to assassinate Pablo Escobar. This plan, financed by the Cali cartel, involved 2 helicopters transporting McAleese and a team of mercenaries to Hacienda Nápoles, Escobar's estate. The goal was to confront Escobar's security, kill him, and return with his head as a trophy. The operation was triggered when an informant alerted the team that Escobar was present at the estate. However, the attack never materialized because McAleese's helicopter crashed in the Andes Mountains due to bad weather. The pilot perished in the crash, while McAleese survived but sustained serious injuries, spending 3 agonizing days on a mountainside. Meanwhile, Escobar, learning of the assassination plot, dispatched hitmen to locate the mercenaries. Aware that capture would lead to a slow, painful death, McAleese managed to escape just before he was found and was ultimately rescued. This failed attempt inspired the documentary Killing Escobar, which recounts the thwarted attack and the perils faced by the mercenaries involved. Kidnapping, a tool of terror. The Medellín Cartel, under Escobar's command, used kidnapping as a key strategy to pressure the Colombian government. One of the most impactful kidnappings was that of Diana Turbay, daughter of former President Julio César Turbay, and a prominent journalist, abducted on August 30th, 1990. Escobar aimed to halt the extradition of drug traffickers to the United States. Tragically, after 5 months in captivity, Turbay was killed during a failed rescue attempt on January 25, 1991. Another significant kidnapping was that of Francisco Santos, a journalist from a powerful political family, who was taken on September 19, 1990. Santos was held for 8 months before being released in May 1991 as part of the cartel's pressure tactics. Additionally, the Medellín Cartel kidnapped Andrés Pastrana, then the mayor of Bogotá and future president of Colombia, on January 18, 1988. He was released after 7 days in captivity, another move by the cartel to intimidate political figures and spread terror throughout the country.
Álvaro Ortega, a respected Colombian football referee, was tragically assassinated on November 15, 1989, in a crime linked to the notorious Medellín Cartel. The incident stemmed from a high-stakes match between Deportivo Independiente Medellín and América de Cali, teams affiliated with rival cartels. After the game ended 3-2 in favor of Cali, Ortega faced harsh criticism for a controversial refereeing decision that many believed had harmed the Medellín team. Concerned for his safety, he requested to be relieved from officiating the return match, but the Colombian Football Federation denied his plea. Following the match, Ortega was ambushed and shot 9 times outside his hotel in Medellín. This shocking crime sent ripples through the nation and led the Colombian Football Federation to cancel the 1989 championship. Later, Pablo Escobar's former hitman, Popeye, revealed that Escobar had ordered the murder after feeling insulted by Ortega's decision while watching the game on television. A deadly attack on the press. On September 2, 1989, the newspaper El Espectador became the target of one of the most brutal attacks by the Medellín Cartel against freedom of the press in Colombia. Known for its relentless reporting on drug traffickers' crimes, El Espectador had painted a target on its back. In a dramatic act of violence, the cartel detonated a car bomb containing 135 kilograms of dynamite outside the newspaper's offices in Bogotá, causing extensive damage to the building. Miraculously, there were no fatalities, but the attack left an indelible mark on Colombian journalism. The Medellín Cartel aimed to silence and intimidate the media that dared to expose their criminal activities, hoping to instill fear in society. Yet, El Espectador refused to back down. The day after the bombing, They published a bold front-page headline that read, "We keep going," using the few operational printing presses that survived the attack. The Prisco brothers, terror unleashed. The Prisco brothers led a dangerous criminal gang that served the Medellín Cartel during the 1980s and early 1990s. Infamous for their brutality, this gang carried out some of the most heinous crimes ordered by Pablo Escobar. Specializing in assassinations, kidnappings, and extortion, the Prisco brothers played a critical role in Escobar's violent campaign against the Colombian state. Their notorious list of victims included Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, El Espectador Director Guillermo Cano Izaza, Magistrate Hernando Baquero Borda, Judge Julio Manuel Castro, Prosecutor Carlos Mauro Hoyos, and Antioquia Governor Antonio Roldan Betancourt, along with several police officers. They were also involved in an attack on Congressman Alberto Villamizar. The Prisco gang was dismantled on January 22, 1991, when David Ricardo Prisco and his brother Armando were killed in simultaneous police operations in Medellín and Rio Negro. Their deaths marked a significant blow to the gang and the cartel's influence.
Escobar's campaign of terror. On March 30, 1990, the Medellín Cartel unleashed a wave of extreme violence in a desperate attempt to thwart the Colombian government's efforts to extradite drug traffickers. Escobar offered a bounty of up to 2 million pesos for every police officer killed, aiming not only to destabilize the country, but also to intimidate authorities into halting anti-drug initiatives. An estimated 2,000 hitmen were mobilized to execute targeted assassinations and attacks against law enforcement. These rewards were advertised in the poorest neighborhoods of Medellín, enticing many impoverished youths who saw them as a quick way to earn money. The violence escalated into ambushes, direct killings, and explosive attacks on police stations and public areas. This period stands as one of the bloodiest in Colombian history, leaving a legacy of terror and despair. The year 1989 is often remembered as one of the most harrowing in Colombian history, deeply scarred by the Medellín Cartel's violence. The cartel unleashed an intense campaign of terror, resulting in the assassinations of prominent political figures and mass attacks that created a climate of fear and insecurity. This violence severely impacted the economy, reducing foreign investment and sparking an unprecedented wave of migration. It also weakened state institutions, fueling corruption and impunity. As a witness poignantly stated, "We felt that the Medellín Cartel had the government against the ropes, and that the state was faced with the choice of surrendering or facing continued attacks." In this bleak context, journalist Maria Elvira Samper published a book documenting these events, labeling 1989 as the worst year in Colombia's history. Pablo Escobar's dark obsession. Pablo Escobar, the head of the Medellín Cartel and one of history's most powerful drug traffickers, was not only notorious for his violent reign over the drug trade, but also for his disturbing attraction to young women. During the peak of drug trafficking in Colombia, the bodies of 49 murdered teenage girls were discovered along various roads, all linked to Escobar's dark world. Authorities concluded that these young women had been involved with Escobar before being killed by cartel hitmen to eliminate any potential threats to his criminal empire. A survivor of this horrific tragedy revealed to El Tiempo in 1991 that despite Escobar's violent reputation, he could be charming and courteous during their encounters. However, most of the girls were not as fortunate. The survivor recounted that many of her friends were killed for merely overhearing information they shouldn't have, or for speaking out. "If you spoke or betrayed them, you were dead," she explained. The Medellín Cartel employed a group known as Los Señuelos, the decoys, to lure teenage girls into dangerous situations. They offered money and false promises of protection to entice the girls. According to journalist Germán Castro Caicedo, Escobar preferred girls between the ages of 14 and 17. Despite the risks, some were drawn in by the hope of a better life. Investigations revealed that the 49 murders were partly driven by Escobar's relentless search for information about his enemies and the need to eliminate potential witnesses after his location was leaked. The bodies of the young victims appeared in various locations around Medellín, each showing signs of extreme violence. As the chaos unfolded, Escobar was declared a wanted man. A reward is offered for information on Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria.
The massacre at Hacienda Los Cocos on November 21, 1988, is etched in history as one of the bloodiest episodes of Colombia's narco wars. Located in Puerto Boyacá, the hacienda became the stage for a brutal attack orchestrated by the Medellín Cartel in collaboration with paramilitary groups. Their main target was Pacho Herrera, a leader of the rival Cali cartel. In a shocking display of violence, the armed group stormed the hacienda, killing more than 20 people, men, women, and children, many of whom endured brutal torture before execution. This massacre was a retaliatory strike after the Cali cartel's car bomb attack on the Monaco building in Medellín on January 13, 1988, where Pablo Escobar and his family lived. Despite the ferocity of the Los Cocos attack, Herrera narrowly escaped, evading death that day. A bombing that shook Bogotá. Another devastating act of terror unfolded on January 30, 1993 in Bogotá. A car bomb laden with 100 kilograms of dynamite exploded in the Veracruz neighborhood, near the Chamber of Commerce and government institutions. The blast killed 25 people and injured around 70, marking it as the third bombing in the capital in less than a month. The explosion created a massive crater and caused significant damage to businesses and homes alike. At this time, Escobar was in exile, having sent a letter to Attorney General Gustavo de Greiff announcing his intention to resume armed conflict. This attack was a desperate attempt by the cartel to pressure the government into negotiations. The Villatina Massacre, a tragic case of misjudgment. Just months after Escobar's escape from La Catedral prison, the Villatina Massacre occurred on November 15, 1992. In the impoverished Villatina neighborhood, a group of police officers entered a local area and executed 9 young people, 7 of whom were minors, on suspicion of links to the Medellín Cartel. These youths were killed without any evidence implicating them in crimes. This massacre was part of a so-called social cleansing effort by certain security forces, who operated extrajudicially in their fight against drug trafficking, ignoring human rights in the process. The massacre occurred amidst rising violence after Escobar's July 1992 escape, prompting President Cesar Gaviria's administration to reactivate the search block to capture him. Under immense pressure from the police, the Medellín Cartel escalated its terror campaign, killing 30 police officers between September and October 1992. The young people in Villatina were labeled as hitmen after the deaths of 2 F2 agents, which prompted the police to retaliate. Witnesses reported that 12 armed and masked men arrived in unmarked vehicles, stormed a store called La Cebada, and executed the victims without trial. Among those killed was Johanna Mazo Ramirez, just 8 years old, alongside other youths aged 15 to 22. The responsible officers fled upon encountering a National Army patrol, and despite complaints, the case remains unsolved. Devastation at Centro 93. On April 15, 1993, the Medellín Cartel struck again, this time at the Centro 93 shopping center in Bogotá. A car bomb loaded with 150 kilograms of dynamite detonated, killing 8 people and injuring 242, making it one of the most devastating attacks of the era. The explosion left an 80-centimeter deep crater and caused extensive damage to over 100 stores, leading to economic losses estimated at nearly 100 million pesos. Nearby buildings, including the International Furniture Center, were also severely damaged. This attack is often seen as the last major act of terror ordered by Pablo Escobar before his death at the hands of Colombian authorities. The DAS building bombing, a city in chaos. The bombing of the Department of Administrative Security, DS, building in Bogotá on December 6, 1989, marked one of the most devastating attacks by the Medellín Cartel. The primary target was DAS director Miguel Alfredo Maza Marquez, a key figure in the fight against drug trafficking and one of Escobar's top adversaries. A car bomb containing approximately 500 kilograms of dynamite exploded outside the DAS headquarters, destroying much of the building and causing widespread damage to nearby businesses, homes, and offices. The attack resulted in 63 deaths and over 600 injuries, throwing the city into chaos. More than 300 businesses in the Paloquemao area were obliterated, along with courts, prosecutor offices, and banks, where crucial judicial files were lost. The magnitude of the bombing was so severe that many victims remained unidentifiable, and families received symbolic urns, similar to those given to the victims of the Avianca Flight 203 bombing just a week earlier. The Oporto Bar Massacre, unanswered questions. On June 23, 1990, the massacre at Bar Oporto left a dark mark on Medellín's history, shrouded in impunity and unresolved questions. That night, at least 10 masked gunmen stormed the popular bar, ordering the men inside to lie on the floor before opening fire indiscriminately. The attack killed 23 young people and injured 3 others. This massacre occurred during a period of intense violence as the government intensified its pursuit of Pablo Escobar. The motives behind the Oporto massacre remain unclear. One theory suggests it was a retaliatory act ordered by the Medellín Cartel or paramilitary groups, though no evidence connected the victims to drug trafficking. Another theory points to the Search Bloc or Los Pepes, a paramilitary group formed by former Escobar allies who turned against him. In 2024, Hugo Eliodoro Aguilar, a former Search Bloc commander, admitted to the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, JEP, that Los Pepes were involved in the Oporto massacre, but the exact details remain murky. John Jairo Velázquez Vázquez, known as Popeye, claimed that the Medellín Cartel received assistance from the Colombian state through the Administrative Department of Security, DAS, and Carlos Castaño to carry out the attack. This assertion was also supported by Luis Hernando Gómez Bustamante, known as Rasguño, a member of the Norte del Valle cartel.
Pablo Escobar. Many glorify him for what he had achieved, but the next time you think about him, remember the stories of his victims. Although he is gone, his presence can still be felt to this day in Colombia. If you want to find out what really happened on the day he died, click the video on your screen right now and I'll see you there.